So Indra is outraged. He says, how can you do this? In my presence, in front of me. It's bad enough if you do it when I'm not here. But you do it here where how dare you, where I can see. So he knows he has to make an example of them. He can't be too soft, otherwise it'll be mayhem. So he says, I'm going to send you, and they're all waiting. They're going, no, not Earth. He says, yes, send you down to Earth. They both get punished. And they say, please, please, send me through no more Wales. They go, no, it came straight down, right here. It's instant punishment. There's no court of appeal and, all that. Let's look at the evidence again. Indra's made his decision. So they go straight down to Earth. And he's born as Santanu. So Santanu is the first. He's the person, the looker at the shoulder, sort of thing. So he's sent down. He's born as a beautiful prince. And he can't really remember. He's a slightly lower rank. Ganga's like a goddess. So she was a slightly lower rank, is in heaven, but a sort of slightly lower. So he can't remember his past incarnation, his past. But he's there just as a wonderful prince in the kingdom of Hastinapur, which is sort of quite near where Delhi is. So this is history, this actually, as it happens. So he's going to be the king of this beautiful kingdom. And the whole story is a feud that develops about this wonderful kingdom. So King Santanu is wandering along the wonderful Ganga river. And he's just doing his daily walk in all his royal king. He's walking along there. And there he sees the beautiful goddess Ganga is standing by the river on earth. And he sees her, and he just, from his past inclination, sometimes we don't know why we feel something. See if this is past inclination from his previous life. And he sees her, and immediately falls in love with her. And he immediately wants her to be his queen, to share her life with him in this wonderful palace. And what could be better than to marry a king? So he goes along to her, many sweet words. He starts talking to her and saying, please, be my queen. And here, the scriptures put in a warning. And the same warning is put in before in the Ramayana as well. It is, be careful what you promise. This is for the men, really. You can relax a little bit. The scriptures warn us, so it's, knows, I'll talk to him later. The scriptures warn us many times, be careful what you promise for. Promise to a woman. Because in the previous, this is all before equality and everything like that. So before that, in the Ramayana, King Dasharatha had promised his wife 2 unconditional promises because she saved him on the battlefield. She took him off the battlefield when he's really badly injured, looked after, put a elastoplast on and rescue remedy cream, arnica tablet, saved his life. So for that he said, I'm so grateful that you've saved my life, that I give you 2 unconditional wishes you can ask of me within my power. I will give it to you. So we've already had that warning because you can see what happens to him. It's a whole different story when she asked for those 2 wishes. He thought it was going to be a nice sports car or a holiday in, Seychelles or something like that. Jewelry or something, or unlimited credit card, something like that. But what she asked for creates this whole destruction of a dynasty. So there's already been that warning, but the same thing here. For some reason, the man, when he's so in love, he'll do or say anything. It's like he's under a spell. So the same thing happens here. She says, I'll marry you on one condition. And he should have known, if he'd read the Ramayana properly, he'd have known not to agree to this. He says, no, I'm not agreeing to that. Well, and then that'd be the end of it being a very short Mahabharata. It'd just been, that's the end of it. But no, he agrees. And what she asked for is you must never question anything I do or anything I say. You must never question me. Any of my actions, you must never question it. So it's amazing what love can do. Because who would agree to that? But he does, he agrees to it. He says, yes, I agree. I will never question you. So he's okay. So they get married and they have a wonderful marriage. And he's delighted. He's just delighted. He's delighted. He never thought he'd have such a beautiful, because Ganga is so beautiful. Never have such a beautiful, and he's so happy. And he's always happy, and he's so great. They have this wonderful marriage and wonderful time. And then the first child is expected, and he's just so delighted. Because the king, in all these stories, the king is concerned about having a son or a daughter to take over. So he's so delighted that they're going to have this child. And all the magazines, OK Magazine and what have you, they're all there. That's going to be the royal birth. And they have a special, try and make a photo of what the child might look like, which is a mixture of both parents. And there's all these, what dresses the queen is wearing. So the whole kingdom is so excited. The whole kingdom is so excited. Everything's happy. It's like a fairy tale. And Santanu thinks, I'm living the dream. He says, life doesn't get better than this. And it's always funny when you feel that life has never been better. You know fate has something in store. So the time gets closer, the royal baby is born, a beautiful child, divine child. And now it gets quite shocking, folks, so prepare yourselves. It's not just, it's quite a shocking story, really. So the wonderful baby is born, and King Santanu has been pacing up and down, like the men used to, pacing up and down the corridor, waiting, chain-smoking cigarette, waiting for this child to be born. He's just pacing up and down. Then he hears the baby's cry. And then it's what you want to hear. The nurse comes out and says, everything's okay. You know, you had that whole 9 months, isn't it? You're waiting and you're so excited about the birth happening. But also there's a worry as well. Will it be okay? Will I be okay? And, will it be a beautiful baby? And it is. Most beautiful baby cry, beautiful baby, and everything's perfect. And Santanu is so happy, and he's giving gifts to everyone. But then a very terrible, actually shocking thing happens. I hope you're ready for this. Something that you wouldn't expect, and you wouldn't expect any mother to do. The last thing you expect any mother to do. The most terrible thing, but he's made this promise that he will never question. But he never imagines. He doesn't imagine. When he made that promise, he just wanted, all he was thinking about was Ganga being his wife. That's all he wanted. He'd have given anything. But he doesn't know what's going to happen next. And Ganga, as soon as she can, she gets up, takes the baby to the Ganges river, which is a very fast-flowing river. It's her river, it's very turbulent. Takes it to the river, and then she does something which you'd never, something monstrous for a mother to do. Is put the baby in the river. Not a sort of, wasn't like water birth or, it was, or first swimming lesson or anything like that. The little baby gets washed away, just a little hand gets washed away into the rapids and nothing like that. And Santanu's like, he can't believe what he's seen. He maybe this is some sort of horrible dream, and I'm going to wake up in my bed, in my palace, and everything will be back to normal. He thinks himself, please let it be a terrible dream that I'm having, and I'm just going to wake up. But it isn't a terrible dream. It's real. And he's just about to speak, and she says, you've promised. You can't question. So it's quite an interesting few months for him to adapt. But luckily he does some Drew yoga and has a mentoring. But it really does affect him. He has like psychiatrist, early psychiatry, and he's lying there. So tell me a bit more about your childhood, sort of thing. So he's trying to work and get over it. And actually he does turn to more drinking a lot, and coffee, very strong coffee. So he's not really in a good way at all. He's in not a good space, really. So the second child is due now, and he's really doesn't know if he's excited or not now. It's sort of a bit. Anyway, to cut along, I don't want to shock you all, because I know you come here for a nice spiritual story, and here I'm telling you something. I said, I went to hear that, I thought I was going to get a really nice, I thought it'd be like the Bible and all nice, like Sermon on the Mount and nice miracles. But no, we're told there's terrible things that happened a long, long time ago. You know, it's awful. And I drove such a long way to get there, and just got this horrible story. So the same thing happens again, and now he's a really nervous wreck. He's just got like this, and he's got a twitchy eye, and he's really in a bad way. Happens again. 7 times it happens, and still he doesn't question. 7 babies, same thing happens. The 8th baby's due, and he really can't keep it together. He's lost his hair and eyebrows, and he's in such a bad way. He's like alcoholic and coffeeaholic and everything. He just can't cope, can't stand it anymore. He's a shadow of his former self. Before he was a great king, and now he's like, he's just like a very poor, almost going insane inside. Anyway, the 8th baby, she takes the 8th baby, and then he says, stop, stop, he says. What sort of monster are you? Why are you doing this? 7 of our children, now the 8th. And then she says, I told you never to question me. He says, because now, she has a tear in her eye. She said, I told you not to question me. He said, because this was my sacred duty. Because in heaven, there's a group of young men called the 8 Vasus. There's 8 of them. And they did something wrong in heaven. And all of them got cursed to go to earth, all 8 of them. And they said, we can't live on earth. We can't live in that place. They said to Ganga, this is in heaven. He says, we know you're going down to earth, Ganga. They said, please, please, don't let us live in that place, earth, because I haven't got Drew Yoga yet. You know, it doesn't come for under free family. We can't wait that long. It says, please don't let us live on earth. You know, we want to stay here in heaven. But we've been cursed to be born on earth. So please, let us be born to you. Let us be born through your womb. Let you give birth to us. And then send us straight back to heaven. Just send us straight back. I'm not recommending this, by the way. So it's quite a mysterious story, really. So Ganga she says, this was my duty to, it wasn't through malice. It was my duty to send them back to heaven. But he says, now, if you just waited one more, it would have been the end, then we could have lived happily. He says, but the tragedy is, you broke your promise. You've broken your promise. And in those days, and even now, a promise is a great thing. You know, now we take promises quite lightly. You know, we make a promise, and before we know it, we'd say, we didn't really mean that anymore. But their promise, these were great men and women that lived. And when they said something, whatever happened, they did it. So she had made this promise, he had made this promise, but he breaks his promise because he just can't handle it anymore. He says, she says, well, you've broken your promise. Now I have to leave. We could have had an amazing, happy life now. We'd have just calmed down, everything would have been perfect. But because you've questioned me, I have to go back to heaven. And he said, this last, the 8th Vasu, the 8th holy soul, has to also be cursed now and live on earth for the whole. And he lives. This is one of the great characters of the story. Beeshma actually is called. He's going to... Beeshma? Yeah, I'll come to it in a sec. He's not called that yet. I'm going to come to that in a minute. So he is also now, burdened with an earthly life. So he goes, well, I mean, you did... I suppose he was like... it's all his fault now. And that's the other great lesson. That, I don't know if I dare say this, the men have to learn somehow. It's their fault, isn't it? I don't know why, but he's gone through all this, and now it's his fault that It's funny logic, but he's saying, I've gone through this logic, it's all my fault now. Because I didn't know, if you'd explained it to me earlier, maybe I wouldn't have questioned you. But anyway, no, it's your fault. So Ganga says, what I'm going to do, and he's called Devarata. What's his name? Devarata. Devarata was his name. And I'm back in a second. She says, I'll take him now. I take him up to, I have to go to heaven. I take him to heaven for 10 years. And he'll be trained by Lord Indra how to be a great king. Because Devarata was born to be the great king. He would have been the greatest king that the world has ever seen. He doesn't actually become king. But he was trained, that was his destiny. He was Santanu's eldest son. And he would have been the greatest king. He was taken to heaven to be trained by the gods in diplomacy, how to be a king, and say, how do you do, and where are you from, and everything, how to be a great king. And how to administer justice, how to be fair, how to rule a great kingdom, how to, pose for photographs, and everything he learns in heaven. So poor Santanu, not only has all that happened to him, 7 children being, sent back to heaven, now he loses his wife as well, and his son. He's a very lonely figure for 10 years. Poor, because what we're talking about now, I'm going to do this story probably in 4 parts, so maybe you're worried about how long it's going to be. It's hardly started, it's been half an hour. I've only got past the first bit. Because some of you might know this, oh my God, we're going to be here forever. So, it's just the beginning bit. But what we've got is a whole life that goes through. Before we get to the Gita, we go through about 4 generations of this family. 3 or 4 generations of what happens. What happens during them. What happens before the battle. This is just, while everyone's waiting for the battle, this book happens. And this is the greatest spiritual teachings perhaps ever in this book. If you just read that and you can read it is one thing. If you can understand it, it helps if it's translated from Sanskrit or into Dutch or English or whatever. But then to really understand it is one thing. And then to know it is another thing. And if you know it, there's enough in here to really transform you. So he's a very lonely figure, thinking of how things might have been if he just had held on that little bit longer. If only, it's all if only I'd done that, if only I'd done this. And why? So it's a very lonely figure, walking along the Ganges, going to the places where he used to sit with Ganga Mother, to sit holding hands, and it was so sweet. And it was that song like Yesterday. That was his favourite, remember the Beatles song? Yesterday, he'd been singing that, and all his troubles were such a long way away. And he was so, and he's so sorry for himself, really, poor man. He's a lonely, lonely figure. For many years, this goes on 10 years, and they would say, the poor king. They say, but the king isn't poor, he's got everything, no, but inside, he's poor. So sad. Then one day, he's walking along the Ganges, and there he sees his beloved Ganga's there. And she's not on her own, she has this beautiful 10-year-old boy, Prince Devarata. So he's finished the first part of his training, and he's there, beautiful prince. And he runs up to them both, and he's so delighted, in tears of joy. And he begs her to stay. He says, please change your mind and just stay. We can have such a wonderful life. I'll never question you again. And she says, no, what? That time has ended. It can't be again. But I do leave you your son. And then the wonderful thing happens. He has this wonderful son now. So the 2 of them are always going off to do everything together. Football together, darts, they like everything, horse riding. They just love being together, and the king's so delighted to have this great companion, the great successor and teaches him everything about the kingdom, shows him the different places that he rules. And Devrata is such a great prince, he's even greater than Santanu. And they live many years together, happily together. And it's a great story. And the story could more or less end there, that Devrata takes over the kingdom and everyone lives happily ever after. And that could be the end of the story. But it isn't. Don't worry, folk, you know it isn't ended yet. We'll sit here, so can't go yet. When there's a break, you might be able to go then. But... So what happens then is Santanu's getting a little bit older. He's getting a little bit older, and he's thinking, well, what am I now going to start handing over the kingdom to my son? And he's thinking in his mind, it'd be nice to have a companion to sort of share my old age with. We could go on little holidays to Spain and do little things out in the car, little trips together and picnics. He's thinking it'd be nice in my older age to have a companion. And then he's out one day and he sees beautiful Satyavati. And Satyavati is another goddess. And she was actually, they say she was born, a bit of a funny story, but born from a fish. So she came from the gods. So she was like a goddess. She'd been grown up in quite a poor family, like a fisherman family, but herself was a great goddess. So he saw her and fell in love with her again. It's all like part 2, fall in love with her again. He sort of just got over a lot of his issues with Ganga. He's been to counselling and he sort of let go of it, and he's done all sorts of workshops where they're punching pillows and breaking things and screaming, let the anger out. So he's been to Drew things and mentoring. So he's quite much more sorted now. He's had his son, he thinks, now I'm ready for another relationship. But in his mind he thinks, I'm not going to make any promises this time. He's learnt his lesson. That's the funny thing. It takes our whole life to learn the lesson, isn't it? When you're young, you've got a beautiful body and energy. You make all these mistakes. When you're older, you think, now I know exactly how to do it. But you're in this older body, you can't do it anymore. So he's there, thinks, I'm not going to make this mistake again. So the first thing he does, he says to Satyavati, sweet words again. Will you be my queen? And she agrees. Then he goes to the father. Will you let your daughter be my queen? And the father says, there's a condition. And he goes, no, I'm not going to do conditions. Well, he's definitely not going to do conditions. That's saying she could, do anything. So he says, no, it's not that. That isn't the condition. He says, what is the condition? The condition is that if she has a son or daughter, that her child is king, not Devrata. He says, I can't agree to that, because he loves his son as much as he loves himself. He says, I can't do that. So he's very frustrated, really. He comes back and he's a little bit he's not his normal self. He comes back and he's a bit sort of moody and a little bit sulky and bad-tempered sort of thing, and say, what's up with you? He goes, nothing like that. It's a bit sort of moody. So his son, Devrata, is really worried about, why isn't my father? He says, what's up, father? Have I offended you? He says, because he can't bear to see his father not happy. Because he loves his father so much, because they do everything together. He said, have I offended you? Have I done something to offend you? Tell me what it is and I'll change it, I'll do anything. His father says, no, it's not you, don't worry, it's nothing. So he asks someone else, says, what's up with my father? And the other person says, well, I can tell you what it is. It's because he's in love with the beautiful Satyavati. So he says, well, what's the problem? He can marry again. I don't, my blessings to marry again. And he says, no, the condition is that you can't be king. Their child, their new child, would have to lead the kingdom. So he rides off on his horse as fast as he can. Says, right, I'm going to sort this out. Goes just special effects, folks. Goes to the horse like that. Or you should have the coconuts. Goes running off. So we're going to have a break in a minute, folks. Now you're all getting thirsty. And there's lovely apple cake out there, isn't there? Dutch make the best apple cake, isn't it? So we've got that there, and wonderful almond cake and everything, and drinks, wonderful coffee, speculoos, biscuits, isn't it? That chocolate things you sprinkle on bread, isn't it? We've got this wonderful Dutch treats here. You can do. Yeah. And you can make promises these days as well, if you want to. It is powerful, so if you want to try it. If you want something to happen, you can make a promise. Little thing, like, you know, want to give up bread or something like that. Or if you're Dutch, you say, I'm going to give up that chocolate sweet. Say, how long for? 2 hours. Like that, oh, another hour to go. Gosh, you're looking at the packet. Or cheese. The Dutch person never gives up cheese, like the hardest thing, isn't it? So he runs, he's on his horse, he gets there, ties the horse up, and he goes to see the fisherman. The prince is there. He says, let my father marry your daughter. He says, why won't you do it? So he says, well, your father wouldn't agree to Satyavati's son being king because he's so attached to you. Says, that's okay. You know, I renounce that right. Says, I renounce it here at this moment. I renounce. And it's not a little thing to give up all of your inheritance, just to give it up. To be a great king. And not just be an ordinary king, be a great king that will be famous throughout the whole of the known world. Says, I give that up for my father's happiness. And then the father thinks, that's okay. Well, what about your children? You might have children, they might not agree, and they might fight with my grandchildren. So he's really quite thinking ahead. So he thinks about it for a moment. And at that moment, he takes the Great Vow. And that's why he's called Beeshma. Beeshma means the one who takes the Great Vow. Because he gives up everything. And also, because he's not a normal person, like we may make a promise, but we may not keep it. You know, we might make a promise. I give up, you know, that chocolate thing, isn't it? You might make that promise, isn't it? I give it up. Make this big vow in front of everyone, all your Dutch friends. And they'll go, oh, it's going to give up the chocolate. What's it called? The chocolate sweet. I'm going to give up. Oh, I'm going to give it up. You know, because it's so delicious. Because it's like the children's food, isn't it? When the children have been good, your mother gives it to you. And it's like that comfort food. So to give it up. So we might make this big vow. We're going to make this big vow and give it up. But after a year or so, we may cheat. Oh, God, no, I can't do it anymore. But these people, when they made a vow, it meant to the death. They would not break this vow. And he makes the great vow. And he stands there, and it's like time stands still. Because time's such an illusion. Because that thing that happened then has affected and really left its mark. Really created the whole of this amazing story, allowed this Gita to happen. The reason why we're talking about it now, thousands of years later, in a whole different part of the world, in a different language, we're talking about it. The thing that happens. And he touches the earth, and he makes what they say, the great, terrible vow. He says, I not only renounce the kingdom, but he takes a vow of brahmachari. Celibacy takes, I will not marry, I will not touch a woman, so your descendants will have the soul. Great thing for a young prince who has everything. He gives it away. I take the great vow of brahmachari, and he touches the earth. and the earth shakes. From the power of what he's saying. And even the gods respond. The gods are all watching. They're up there looking down from their little clouds, and they're playing harps, and they go, "Stop that harp playing, trying to listen." And trumpets, they're worse. The harps are not that noise, just like background. When you're in heaven, it's the harps in the lift. Just harp playing. Then the trumpet, that's a bit more annoying sometimes. All the cherubs trumpeting. "Stop, cherubs, stop trumpeting, trying to listen." And they hear this great vow, and it's like effects go through all the world. And the gods themselves call him Beeshma. It wasn't a name given to him by human beings. The gods say, Beeshma. It was like a sound from heaven. And that was his name. The taker of the great vow. So have a tiny break now. Maybe a little drink or something. Then we can maybe do one more small part about what. Because the long hardly started, Jay. It's just we've only got to the first generation. So if you have a 10-minute break, is that all right?
Yes.
Is that okay? How much time have you all got, by the way? We could do sort of. This could be sort of half. Is that all right?